inaction is teaching us that we can't trust ourselves, when in fact, we should be making goals that scare us because your greatest life, your aspirations, your dream life is on the other side of the discomfort. It's on the other side of facing your fears. It's on the other side of confronting failure. Welcome back to another episode of A Year Without Fear. I'm your host, Bethany Morris, and I'm a certified somatic trauma-informed creative coach who believes that your greatest life lies on the other side of facing your fears. Let's get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about the fear of calling 2026 your year. And we're going to cover how collective trauma from 2020 is still keeping us small, why making New Year's resolutions is more complicated than you think, goal setting and habit formation, different ways you can feel safe making big goals, and then some somatic exercises, and of course, the homework. Remember the end of 2019 when we were all like, 2020, this is going to be my year. It's going to be my year where I change my entire life. And then everything changed. The global pandemic left us all in disarray and shock. We haven't seen anything like that for a really long time. And in our modern world, we had to adjust our work life, our family life, our school life, pretty much everything to accommodate the global pandemic at that time. And from that experience, we learned to not get our hopes up, to not dream big, to not take risks. It's really kept us playing small. And even though it kept us small, we have been joking that, after 2020, I'm not going to call 2026 my year. After 2020, I'm not going to make New Year's resolutions. I'm just going to try to get through it. But I believe that that mindset is holding us back. And I believe that that mindset is part of the collective trauma that we all experienced during 2020. That was a real time, not just for us as individuals, but us as a global society. But when we let the trauma take over, there's this part of us that is again kept small, but also a part of us that doesn't go after our wildest dreams anymore. And that's something that I want to discuss today and kind of break through. Me personally, I set unrealistic goals, especially around getting fit and losing weight. And then when I inevitably fail because I am experiencing all or nothing thinking, I get into the cycle of failure and punishment that never really ends. And that's because subconsciously, I think I'm trying to protect myself, to keep myself small, to not take any risk or any chances because the past, let's say, half a decade has been so insane. It's been crazy. It's been exhausting in a lot of ways. And we've all gone through a lot. So I think that we need to keep setting these goals that push us and make us excited. So with that, I wanted to get into the fear of failure. So fear of failure to me is a type of paralysis. It keeps us stuck because when we have that fear, we tend not to do anything. We tend to get paralyzed. It can look like perfectionism and just waiting for the perfect moment to get started on that painting on your YouTube channel, on your TikTok, on whatever that you're working on your business. And because of the fear of failure, especially after the pandemic, I think that a lot of us have been stuck and a lot of us haven't made a lot of big goals that we really want to achieve because, again, we're still dealing with that personal and collective trauma from the global pandemic. But I want to offer to you that if you keep staying small, if you don't take chances, if you don't just go for it, that you're not only keeping yourself stuck, but you're also in the cycle of not being able to trust yourself. It's kind of like I was talking about earlier about the um, failing and punishment cycle that I go through. It is like that when you're like, "Oop, I am going to make this goal, but then I am going to quit by February, or I don't start it until half the year is over, or I never start it." That kind of inaction is teaching us that we can't trust ourselves, when in fact, we should be making goals that scare us because your greatest life, your aspirations, your dream life is on the other side of the discomfort. It's on the other side of facing your fears. It's on the other side of confronting failure. And if your goals don't scare you, not just a little bit, but actually scare you, then you're not dreaming big enough. I think that until we can actually admit to ourselves that we do want this big thing, that we do want to be a full time creator, that we do want to be a full time artist, that we do want to be a full time writer, whatever it is, that you're training yourself to think small, to be small. Because when you think small, your physical body is also going to react in the same way. Your body is going to shrink itself. It's going to react in the same way because it is trying to get you back into the state that you were in before. It's trying to stay at homeostasis, which is just a base level. So it's trying to stay at the base level of where you are now versus where you want to be. And a lot of what keeps us stuck is that we're fearing the feeling of failure in our bodies because we've experienced that before. And it is really hard to keep going after that. It's really hard to build your confidence or maintain your confidence after that. And especially as creatives, where it feels particularly devastating because we put not just work and effort into our art, but we also put our heart and soul into it. So even if it is one instance of failure, I think that we as creatives tend to again get into that all or nothing thinking and thinking, if my novel is not the next great American novel, then it's not worth doing. And I'm a failure and I can't try again because I put my whole heart and soul into this and it turned out like crap, which is somewhere that I've definitely been before. When I was trying to write my very first book, it was a mess to say the least. It was terrible. It was disorganized. It was all over the place. And when I failed at that, I really didn't try to do anything creative for years after that, for years. And that has really kept me back. I feel like the other fear of failure for creatives is based on the fact that because we have these unconventional dreams, we have been trained by society our entire lives to say those are unrealistic, to say that we can't achieve them, to say that nobody is going to be the next great American novelist because you're from Podunk Town, Texas. You can't be the next greatest painter because you're from a lower income level or whatever it is. I think that a lot of people talk down on creative pursuits, A, because they're not brave enough to go after them by themselves, and B, because there's this kind of will or there's this kind of need to shut people down so that we all stay in the status quo, so that we all are part of a community, even if that community is making us miserable. For example, when I was getting my English degree, everyone was like, "What are you going to do with an English degree?" Um, they were like, what kind of job are you going to get in your future?" I had one guy say to me at a party, he was like, "What's your major?" And I was like, "English." And he literally said, "I'm sorry." Because at the time when I was in school, everybody said that you either wanted to get in coding or like some sort of tech, software development. Or if you were more creative, you should get into graphic design. And those are going to be the most stable jobs and the jobs of the future. And then Canva came along, and everyone can make beautiful graphics without having to hire a graphic designer. Not saying that graphic designers are not valuable, they are, but there was a disruption in the industry with Canva. Similarly to software development, now there's AI, and I'm not saying that AI is quite at the place to replace coders and software engineers, UX designers, whatever it is, but I think that we're heading that way. I think that nothing is stable. So you might as well go after your dreams. And again, your dreams are on the other side of facing discomfort. It's on the other side of facing your fears. But then it's like, okay, how do I reach these huge goals that I have? Not lose myself along the way, not lose my mind along the way. And that has everything to do with goal setting and habit formation. I think the reason that Atomic Habits was so popular back when it first came out and still so popular today is that we're all looking for ways to reach our goals in a way that feels systematic, in a way that feels more automatic, in a way that doesn't feel like there's so much resistance. I think that goals should tell you where you want to go, whereas the systems that you put in place in order to reach your goals are steps along the way of how you're going to get there, of how you're going to get to your biggest goal. So it's really important that we, as creatives, even though we have a tendency to kind of fly by the seat of our pants, set goals and then set systems to keep those goals in place. Because whenever I'm creating something, I have that tendency to be like in flow state and just going and going and going and not making time for anything else because I'm hyper fixated on that. But when you give yourself structure, when you say, I'm going to write from 9 to 12 today, and it's every single week you show up at the same time, it's easier to get into that flow state because your brain is like, okay, now is the time we have to be creative instead of waiting for the time where you're inspired and when you're more predisposed to go into flow state. That can be problematic because you're not in the routine. You're just kind of sporadically creating, which I suppose can work for some, but I think for a lot of us, we need structure in our lives to keep us going. So one way to implement our goals into our daily lives is habit stacking. Habit stacking is just saying that if you have a habit that you already do, for example, every morning I make my bed, I will say after I make my bed for the morning, I'm going to meditate for 5 to 10 minutes. Or you can say after I brush my teeth in the morning, I am going to write for 2 hours. Or after I finish dinner, I'm going to paint for a couple hours. So the habit stacking formula is just basically I will do this before or after the current habit that I already have. So that makes it easier to just kind of get into the flow of things. It's not like you're just trying to force doing the habit at random times and at random times of the day, random times of the week, etc. We need to set systems in place. We need to habit stack so we can have that automatic workflow. If you are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and rate if you're listening on Spotify or Apple. So now I want to talk about self-sabotage so now I wanted to talk about self-sabotage as it relates to creative. So I think that the first self-sabotaging is procrastination as protection. We say you have a very ambitious painting in your head, but you're scared to execute it. And you're scared to execute it because it involves a new technique that you haven't tried before. And instead of just going for it, instead of putting paint on the canvas, you are stuck, paralyzed because you are trying to avoid the act of getting started, because if you never get started, you can't fail. So what I like to do is give myself a deadline when I have those big goals and to tell that deadline to the internet or to friends and family specifically. I think when we tell our friends and family, or just, I mean, your friends online, whoever it is, you're giving yourself an extra piece of accountability that just really helps you to not go back on the promises that you made to yourself. The next self-sabotaging habit that we have as creatives is perfectionism. So if you are, say, writing a novel, writing a screenplay, writing a play, whatever it is, you will wait until the conditions are absolutely perfect to write. For example, for me, I really like to write when I have my candles burning, when I have incense going, when I'm creating a vibe. But I heard someone say once that you can't be so precious about your writing. You have to, especially if you're working full time or you're a student full time, you have to be able to get into flow state when you, again, are writing in your scheduled times, because you can't just, wait for inspiration to start, especially when you're a student, especially when you're working full time. You are battling already with a schedule that's inflexible. So you need to add that structure into your already inflexible, if you will, schedule. And I think that although it's great that you can create a vibe like I try to when you have the time or you're at home, I think it's also important to say that sometimes you're just going to have to muscle through. Sometimes you're just going to have to do it when it feels really uncomfortable and you're feeling some resistance or you're feeling some fear. You're going to have to just push through it because as creatives, we do it not just because we're trying to get famous or not just because we're trying to get awards, but because we love our craft, because there's this sort of bleeding heart quality to us that I think is just more empathy than the common person has. So continuing to work on your projects when you are feeling resistance is really important to build that muscle of saying, I'm going to keep going no matter what. I'm going to keep going, even if the book is turning out terribly. I'm going to keep going if the new painting technique I tried looks awful on the canvas, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the next thing that plagues creatives when they are trying to create something is distractions. So, for example, you can be sitting down to shoot a YouTube video and you all of a sudden feel the need to deep clean your apartment, or all of a sudden you feel the need to organize your clothes, whatever it is, you feel the need to do it right then and there. And it's fear coming through in a way that is manifesting as something that you need to do other than what you were put on earth to do at the right time. And something I like to do, and what really helps me is to use the Pomodoro method. So, for example, if I get that urge to like do dishes during a writing session, I will set the Pomodoro for 25 minutes to write. And once that's over, I'll set another timer for 10 minutes and I have 10 minutes to do the dishes. And I find that the more reps of Pomodoros I do, the more I want to stay focused in my project. It's basically just the first two Pomodoros where I might indulge in little side quests before I'm like actively in the flow of writing. That's something that's really helped me keep myself accountable. It's something that's really helped me figure out that I can do hard things. The final thing that I think a lot of creative self sabotage with is negative self talk. So it could be like, I don't belong in this space, or this award isn't for people like me and people who grew up in my circumstances, or I haven't done enough reps to be able to deserve being recognized by my industry. And then something that I like to do after I have one of those thoughts is to ask myself, why not? So if I'm thinking I don't feel qualified to be in this space, that I don't feel qualified to lead, I would ask myself, why not? Where does that come from? Is that a pressure that I put on myself? Okay, maybe it is. And where does that stem from? So just kind of going back and understanding why you're having these thoughts helps you to be able to break the pattern, right? Because again, we can't break patterns if we don't first recognize that they're there. So just something to think about. Ask yourself, why not? Why can't I be in this room? Why can't I be the next Steven Spielberg, et cetera, et cetera. But also, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's this sort of baggage around setting big goals and setting New Year's resolutions. And that the first thing is that most people quit by February, right? Most people are really inspired at the beginning of the year in January. They're going hard at the gym. They are working out 5 times a week, whatever it is. And then in February, you find that you can't sustain that level of activity, um, and that you are burning yourself out or that you burn yourself out and you never stick with these things because you're burnt out at the end of it. But when you do that, what happens is your identity, who you are, becomes that I fail at making resolutions. And if you are in your phase of your life like I am, where you have really big goals that you're setting for yourself, I think it's really important to change your actual identity and not to just say some affirmations. It's really important that your body believe the new identity that you are trying to create. I also think, other than the baggage of not being able to create a new identity around New Year's resolutions because you've been stuck so long, is the fear that resolutions seem so final. Especially as creatives, I think we need a lot more flexibility in our lives and the ability to pivot, to change what we're doing, to change what we're working on. But I think the important part of that is that you need to be able to discern between having these intuitive sparks that are telling you, hey, go in a different direction with this project, or hey, maybe try writing this scene first and then seeing where that fits into the rest of the novel, and not, trying to write in order all the time, whatever it is. I think that as creatives, we need more flexible ways to say resolutions. So I like to call them experiments. So, for example, if you're trying to say film a short film or something like that, then you have this intuitive spark that says, hey, maybe we should direct from a different angle because I'm not getting through to the actors. Maybe we should change the staging. Maybe we should pivot. I think it's really important to be able to discern between the intuitive sparks and when your fear is trying to keep you small, when your brain is trying to keep you in homeostasis, when your brain is trying to keep you in the same social status, in the same pack of people, right? Even though we want to change. So I think that the main thing is to be able to say, is this resistance that's coming from my fear? Or is this resistance coming from my intuition telling me that I need to pivot in some way? Nope. The final thing I The final thing I wanted to say about this before we get into the somatic exercises is that I think it's important as creatives that we experiment all the time, that we get re-inspired, because we need play in our life. Because when we are experimenting, when we are playing with different things, that's when our minds expand. That's when we have connections to each other that we never would have had before. So it is really important to maintain a state of play and not force as a creative. Okay, so let's move on to the somatic exercises for today. Okay, so the first somatic exercise I want to do is just to say your goal out loud. Say it out loud, not in your head, not on paper. I want you to say, this year, I want to finish a book. This year, I want to experiment with new painting styles, with new art styles. This year, I want to make more experimental films. Whatever it is, just say it out loud and be specific about it. So that's step one. Step two is to close your eyes and notice how it feels to say your goal out loud. So when I say, this year, I want to write a novel, I want you to notice where you feel that in your body. For me, I feel a little bit of tightness in my chest when I think about that, but I don't feel paralyzing fear as I felt before. So to me, that's progress that I'm making for my body to regulate around this new goal that I'm trying to push through, that I'm trying to make happen. And then after you have identified where in your body you're feeling that, I want you to say out loud, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to feel afraid. I want you to comfort the part of yourself that feels those feelings. So after you identify the feelings, then I want you to talk out loud and say, hey, it's okay to have these feelings. That makes sense because of our past experiences. But what is important is that we know that our past experiences don't dictate our future. And then the next somatic exercise is to build upon that. We're going to acknowledge our fear. We're going to talk to the part of ourselves that feels the fear. And then we're going to make one small, emphasis on small, aligned action where we can move slowly towards our goals. And the more you do this, the more you sit down to film, the more you paint, the more you write, whatever it is that you do, you're going to gain momentum day after day after day because you did the scariest thing. You showed up, you just started. I had a yoga teacher who used to say the hardest part is showing up. And today you need to congratulate yourselves because you showed up on the mat today. Now, moving on to the homework section. So, the first thing I want you to do is set one big goal for 2026, not 10 big goals, not 3 big goals, one big goal that you have. And I want you to say it out loud. This year, I want to X, and then I want you to write that goal down. The second thing I want you to do is to write that goal down weekly. This is something that I do in my bullet journal. Every time I start a new week, I will write down all of my goals for the year or the new identity that I want to become in that year. And then I will slowly, throughout the year start checking things off. And it's really gratifying to see, like, once you can check off a whole bunch of stuff. Like this year, I checked off all my goals, which is amazing and something that I didn't think I was going to be able to do during the last quarter of the year. So it's something that I think my brain got used to seeing. And once you get used to seeing that, your brain is going to adapt and say, okay, if this is something I want to do, how can I get that done? How can I finesse? How can I pivot? How can I adapt to making those dreams a reality? Because when you have such a narrow view of like, to reach this goal, I must go to film school, then I must be a PA, then I must do whatever. And it's a lot of money, to go to film school. I think that when you write down your goals weekly, you're giving your brain a chance to be more creative. And then the third assignment is to pick one habit stack that you can do that is going to get you closer to your goals. So I want you to say, before I go to work for the day, I'm going to write for 10 minutes. Before I go to the gym, I'm going to paint for a couple minutes. Before or after I get back from the gym, I'm going to practice drawing. After I get out of class for the day, I'm going to go back home or go to my dorm and record one TikTok, record one YouTube video, whatever it is. So you can make those habits easier to follow through with because you are attaching them to a habit that you already have. Now we're going to get into a quick life update. So I am over 17,000 words in my novel, which is crazy to say. I am very, very close to being at the end of Act 1, which is super insane. I just need to finish the scene that I'm presently working on. But the fact of the matter is, I feel really creatively drained right now. And even though it feels scary to do, I am going to take a break from writing the novel and focus more on the podcast and content creation and just recuperating and again, experimenting, trying new things, trying new hobbies so I can get the creative energy back again. I don't want to work until I'm completely depleted and I'm not able to complete anything anymore. I want to take rest when I need it. So when I get back to writing, I feel like my cup is full and that I can really do well from here on out. Okay, so today we covered how our collective trauma from 2020 is keeping us small, why setting New Year's resolutions, especially as creatives, can be more complex than you think. We talked about habit stacking and some systems that you could put in place in order to reach your goals. We talked about how to feel safe when reaching your goals. And finally, we went over some somatic exercises and, of course, homework to help you feel more safe in your body when you are going after these big goals. And then I just wanted to close on this final thought, and that is 2026 can be your year. It can be your year if you let it. It can be your year if you are focused on taking small steps to achieve your goals because those add up. Those create momentum. Those create new ideas and spark new ideas. And as creatives, that's what we're looking for at the end of the day. Thank you for listening to another episode. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, or rate if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast, and I will see you next week.